Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Geopolitics with Joe. This is episode 76. It's not hard to believe we've done this 76 times, but yeah, welcome back. Today is January 27th, 2026. I'm your host, Gordon McCormick, aka the ghost of bass Patrick Henry, and we're going to get into as much as we can today in our allotted time, and there's a lot to discuss. And we definitely won't get to all of it, but we'll get to as much of it as we can. All right, so I think when we parted ways on Friday, we ran out of time. We were talking about Iran. We were talking about Israel. We were talking about the Middle. We started to get back into the Middle East. We were talking about some of the stuff happening in the Middle East. So maybe we'll pick up there. The operations, things that are happening are totally like starting to converge. Things happening abroad, things happening at home. Narratives are starting to converge. You're seeing parallel operations, not necessarily coordinated, meaning they're run by the same people, but parallel, meaning that the same thing happening in foreign countries happening here. Color revolutions being run in Iran, color revolutions being run in Minnesota. The question being who is behind all of them. It could be the same group of people. Actually, it probably is. I think we played the video on Friday of Scott Ritter. Don't need to play that again, but I think his analysis is pretty spot on that that it was a head fake. Trump encouraged the people in Iran to escalate. They did escalate, and the military support that they were expecting never materialized, almost like a Bay of Pigs, but run against the deep state. The deep state ran the Bay of Pigs, of course, promising these Contra rebels that they trained in Central America to land on the beaches of Cuba, and then the U.S. Navy would back them up and attack the Cuban military when they showed up, and that never happened. The Cuban military showed up and basically just killed them all or captured them all. And the whole idea was to hang that around the neck of JFK, humiliate him because he wasn't read in on any of it. He wasn't even allowed to be in the room when they were conducting the operation, the excuse being plausible deniability he should maintain. And when JFK figured that out, that was when he determined that the CIA had to be destroyed. And the rest is history. Because, of course, that didn't end up happening. He, of course, was destroyed. And now President Trump, in my opinion and the opinions of many others, have picked up the mantle, taken over where JFK left off, and are going to finish that storyline, that story arc. But that has not been, it has been a circuitous route, a circuitous journey to get to that end game. It hasn't been as simple as just winning an election, the stroke of a pen, the abolishment of an agency, and the end of an era, the CIA. It's a much, much more complicated solution than that, because the CIA, of course, is not just a government agency. It is a criminal network that has embedded itself pretty much all over the entire world. Of course, it transcends the CIA. It predates the CIA. Before the CIA, it was MI6. Before MI6, it was the British East India Company. Before that, it was the London bankers, the Genoan bankers, the Venetian bankers. That's the past, and that basically covers the past 1,000 years of human history. And of course, it still is all of those things, while it's still the CIA, Mossad, the Khazarian Mafia, the Jewish Mafia, the Italian Mafia, all of it, right? So with that said, let's zoom back in and pick up where we left off on Daily this morning, where we hit a few of these storylines. And so we'll start today with Iran again, picking up where we left off on both Friday and at Daily this morning. So Trump yesterday, it was reported, well, I guess yesterday this was RT, and they typically are maybe a day behind when it comes to a lot of U.S. domestic storylines. But it says the U.S. says Trump threatens Iran with armada bigger than around Venezuela. Tehran has warned that it stands ready with its finger on the trigger to fend off any U.S. or Israeli aggression. The U.S. Department of War has deployed a big armada of warships and other military assets near Iran, U.S. President Donald Trump has stated, while insisting that diplomacy remains an option. Earlier this month, Trump reportedly came close to ordering strikes on Iranian targets in response to a violent crackdown on anti-government protests that left thousands dead, according to a number of human rights groups. While he delayed that action, military assets have continued to flow into the region. In an interview with Axios on Monday, Trump stated the situation with Iran remains in flux. We have a big armada next to Iran, bigger than Venezuela, he said, referencing a U.S. naval buildup near the South American nation that led to the capture of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. At the same time, Trump suggested that Tehran genuinely wants to negotiate a deal, claiming they called on numerous occasions they want to talk. The centerpiece of the buildup is the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier strike group, which U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, confirmed is now operating in the Middle East. An additional F-15 and F-35 fighter jets, refueling tankers, and air defense systems have also been deployed. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper visited Israel on Saturday to discuss joint military plans. In response, General Mohammed Pakpour of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps issued a stern warning over the weekend. He stated that the IRGC is more ready than ever, finger on the trigger, to defend the country, and promised painful consequences for any aggression from the U.S. or Israel. Tehran warned Washington against any miscalculations, blaming the U.S. and Israel for instigating the severe internal unrest in Iran. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi recently said that over 3,000 people were killed during the violent protests that began in late December. The Trump administration appears divided regarding how to proceed forward. Some officials have reportedly advocated for enforcing the president's red line to punish Tehran, while others have questioned what strategic goal bombing would achieve. Washington has long paused for a deal that would require Iran to get rid of all of its enriched uranium, cap its missile stockpile, cease support for regional proxies, and abandon independent uranium enrichment, terms Iran has shown no willingness to accept. Yeah, so that's the stage being set, right? Stakes are very high, of course, as they have been for the past several weeks, ever since the Nicolas Maduro op kicked off, and frankly, even long before that. It seems like Trump is running what's called the strategy of tension against the people who are normally running the strategy of tension against civilian populations around the world, most recently against the American people. And basically, the strategy of tension calls for keeping the targeted group in a state of chaos, confusion, overwhelming confusion and chaos. And the goal, of course, when it's run against a civilian population, is to trick the civilian population into demanding stronger government, which then, of course, leads to totalitarianism or some form of it. I don't think that's obviously the strategy, like the intended outcome of running it against the bad actors in our government. I think the intended outcome is to get the bad actors in our government to jump on rugs just in time for those rugs to be pulled out from underneath them, and to make them look like assholes, basically. And one of the great examples of that, because I know that there are people who are skeptical of that theory, and understandably so, CanCon actually showed to me this morning, and that would be Axios. Exclusive and secret recordings, Cruz trashes Trump tariffs and Vance. Let me get this pulled up in archive. Hopefully we're not getting any internet issues today. I know that this morning there was a lot of issues with Rumble. For some reason, this is not loading. This is a little concerning. Is it just the archive website that's not working? Yeah, I got some other tabs trying to get other archive websites to run, but all right, so while we wait for that to load, we can try to pull something else up. It's a little frustrating, but that's just been kind of the state of the internet. Internet's been kind of a dumpster fire these past few weeks. There we go. All right, so, and there she blows. All right, so in exclusive and secret recordings, Cruz trashes Trump tariffs. It says Senator Ted Cruz, the Texas Republican, eyeing a 2028 White House run, torched Vice President Vance and ridiculed President Trump's tariff policy during a private meeting with donors. According to recordings obtained by Axios, Cruz's why it matters, Cruz's rebukes during 2 meetings last year are some of the harshest criticisms of Trump and Vance by a fellow Republican since they took office a year ago. The recording's nearly 10 minutes in total. Let me just check on the chat, make sure everyone's alive. Everyone good in the chat? Always have to make sure that I'm not like muted or anything like that. Let's put the comments on screen so y'all can be involved. Let's see. Cruz's rebukes during 2 meetings last year are some of the harshest criticisms of Trump and Vance by fellow Republicans since they took office a year ago. The recordings, nearly 10 minutes in total, provide an unvarnished look at how Cruz is positioning himself as a traditional free trade, pro-interventionist Republican ahead of a possible 2028 primary campaign against the less hawkish Vance. And that's just so interesting to call it a traditional free trade Republican, as if, having no tariffs and just allowing transnational corporations to just flood our marketplaces with cheap goods that are made by slaves, by slave labor, as if that is free trade. Like that is like the pinnacle of moral turpitude, right? That's what Ted Cruz would tell you. What a clown. Zoom in during his talks, Cruz cast Vance as a pawn of conservative podcaster Tucker Carlson. Cruz has accused Carlson of promoting anti-Semitism and an anti-Israel foreign policy in their well-publicized spats. The recordings of Cruz were provided to Axios by a Republican source. They were made in early and middle 2025. In the latter recording, Cruz warns donors that Trump's tariffs could decimate the economy and lead to his impeachment. Oh, okay, Ted. Yeah, see, this is the playbook, guys. And this is why I've been warning everybody that the Republicans are the real enemy that we have to be fighting. He tells them that after Trump introduced the tariffs in early April 2025, Cruz and a few other senators had a call with Trump in which they urged him to stand down. Cruz says the lengthy call, which stretched past midnight, did not go well, and that Trump was yelling and cursing. Quote, Trump was in a bad mood, end quote, Cruz tells donors. Quote, I've been in conversations where he was very happy. This was not one of them, end quote. Cruz says he told Trump, quote, Mr. President, if we get to November of 2026 and people's 401ks are down 30% and prices are up 10 to 20% at the supermarket, we're going to go into election day and face a bloodbath, end quote. You're going to lose the House, you're going to lose the Senate, and you're going to spend the next 2 years being impeached every single week. According to Cruz, Trump's response, according to Cruz, was, quote, fuck you, Ted, end quote. Based. That is what I voted for, by the way. Just in case everyone's wondering, that is what I voted for, is that right there. Fuck you, Ted. I just want to say it again. It feels so good to say it out loud. When a questioner at the donors session mentions Liberation Day, Trump's branding for his tariffs unveiling. And by the way, what are we liberating ourselves from? We're liberating ourselves from Ted Cruz, because he is the dungeon master who has us all in a GIMP mask, believing that if we just vote harder for Republicans, they're going to save the day. That's what Jesse Kelly and all those losers on X, formerly Twitter, are telling us. They are the gatekeepers. They are the masters of our reality that keep us from reclaiming our sovereignty. So Liberation Day is the liberation from the Republican Party and the control apparatus over the populist movement. Cruz jokes, quote, "I've told my team if anyone uses those words, they will be terminated on the spot. That is not language we use." See, that right there, guys, is signal of what Ted Cruz thinks of you and what he thinks of MAGA and what he thinks of all of us. There is no liberating the American people from the chains of enslavement. There's only servitude and perpetual morass of mediocrity as delivered by the Satan-worshiping Ted Cruz. Cruz also told donors about battling the White House to accept a trade agreement with India. This is so interesting. All right, because I've long kind of speculated and thought that India is, I mean, think of what I said earlier. Before it was MI6, it was the East India Trading Company, right? India, I think, is like the deep state proxy in Asia. Everyone always points to China or North Korea or even South Korea, which I think South Korea probably is another one. But India, I think, is really like the home base. However, I also think Modi is part of the Sovereign Alliance, the same way that like the United States is a major deep state hub, and yet Donald Trump is not part of that, right? So you kind of have to separate those two things. When a donor asks who in the administration is resistant, and by the way, we'll circle back to India here in a bit. When a donor with other stories, when a donor asks who in the administration is resistant to reaching such accords, Cruz mentions White House economic advisor Peter Navarro, he went to prison for Trump, Vance, and quote unquote sometimes Trump. Cruz repeatedly brings up Vance in the recordings, tying him to Carlson. I want these recordings, by the way. How do I get these recordings? If anyone in the chat knows where they are, please post a link. I appreciate that. Vance in the recordings, tying him to Carlson and accusing, I'm sorry, let me back up. Cruz repeatedly brings up Vance in the recordings, tying him to Carlson and accusing him of advancing the podcaster's anti-interventionist foreign policy. Yeah, because we're anti-war, Ted. Quote, Tucker created JD. JD is Tucker's protege, and they are one and the same, end quote, Cruz says. Between the lines, Cruz has been waging a months-long campaign against Carlson on social media, but he has refrained from publicly linking Carlson and Vance, who are friends. At one point in the recordings, Cruz alleges that Vance and Carlson pushed for the ousting of former National Security Advisor Mike Waltz because Waltz supported bombing Iran, a position Trump ultimately embraced. Waltz, quote, supported being vigorous against Iran and bombing Iran, and Tucker and JD took Mike out, end quote. Cruz tells the donors. Vance has said he supported the bombings of Iran's nuclear sites last June. Now, that's an interesting data point because, you know, Mike Waltz is obviously a huge Israel puppet, as is Ted Cruz, obviously. And, you know, some of the trepidation around J.D. Vance, which I think is totally warranted and totally reasonable, is his connections to Peter Thiel, his connections to Palantir, his connections to that whole nexus of people, those technocrats. And a lot of those technocrats, if you understand like Palantir and where Palantir, you know, the roads lead back to, the roads lead back to Tel Aviv with Palantir. And, you know, Peter Thiel serving Israel and giving them the technology to impose technocracy on Gaza, the IDF. So J.D. Vance, you know, working against the interests of these diaspora and the Zionists is an interesting wrinkle in all this. Again, we have to just be skeptical of everything, but that is a data point that I take in and I put off to the side, and I'm just going to hold on to that because it's a pattern that I've noticed, but now we're kind of getting some affirmation of it. It doesn't mean anything definitive because all this could just be ginned up narrative in order to create the perception of something, right? So we have to be careful of that too. But the trends and patterns that I'm seeing with JD Vance are encouraging, for the reasons why Trump would have picked him as vice president at this moment in time. Again, I'm not ready to anoint anyone though as Trump's successor. I don't even want Trump gone in 2020. I just want Trump to be king for the rest of his life. He's pretty advanced in years. I hope he lives to be 120, 130, 140. But man, I just don't trust anybody else. Anyway, let's get back to this. Okay, so Cruz also says Vance and Carlson were behind the appointment of Army veteran Daniel Davis, a sharp critic of U.S. support for Israel, to a top national intelligence position. I need to take that name and put it in my research bank. The senator called Davis, quote, a guy who viciously hates Israel, end quote, and said he helped to get Davis quickly removed from the job. What they're saying, a Cruz spokesperson said in a statement that the senator is, quote, the president's greatest ally in the Senate and battles every day in the trenches to advance his agenda, end quote. And then it says, quote, those battles include fights over staffers who try to enter the administration despite disagreeing with the president and seeking to undermine his foreign policy, end quote, the statement said. Senator Cruz is proud of those fights, his accomplishments, and his close relationship with Trump. These attempts at sowing division are pathetic and getting boring. I actually don't think these are attempts to sow division. I think these are truthful disclosures that are being deployed by Trump to orchestrate how Lion Ted Cruz, which is the name that Trump gave to him back in 2016, Lion Ted, or maybe even 2015, Lion Ted Cruz. That's what he is. He's a liar. He is a habitual liar. Carlson told Axios that he didn't have anything to do with the ousting of Waltz or the hiring of Davis. Spokespeople for Trump and Vance didn't respond to requests for comment. All right, so I just want to understand real quick. Daniel Davis, is this? I'm trying to remember. Is this? I know there have been people who have been fired for being anti-Israel from the Pentagon. Is that who this guy is? I just have to remember. Okay, so it says over here on his Wikipedia, a retired U.S. Army officer and analyst of U.S. foreign policy. He is one of the earliest military advisors to publicly criticize the war in Afghanistan. Based, let's see, raised in Dallas, Texas, enlisted in 1985. Texas Tech, ROTC, international relations from Troy University, master's degree. He got a bronze. He served in Germany and Iraq. Bronze Star in Operation Desert Storm. Left the Army to work in the private sector, continued to serve in the Army Reserve in 2002 after September 11th attacks, returned to active duty, initially posted at the Pentagon, was deployed to a second deployment to Afghanistan. He was decorated with a second Bronze Star. He retired at the rank of a lieutenant colonel. Davis was disturbed by as a whistleblower, it says Davis was disturbed by what he felt was a program of official deception being presented to the public on the success of the war in Afghanistan. In 2012, after returning to the United States, he sent a report on his observations to the Department of Defense, Office of Inspector General. Unclassified versions of the report were copied to several members of the United States Congress and New York Times. Davis also wrote an article, Truth Lies in Afghanistan, How Military Leaders Have Let Us Down, published by Armed Forces Journal in February 2012. The article drew praise from several U.S. lawmakers and received national press coverage, including by the New York Times, Time, and NPR. Yeah, well, anytime you're getting praised by those outlets, that's not necessarily a good thing. In 2020, Davis published the book 11th Hour in 2020 America, How America's Foreign Policy Got Jacked Up and How the Next Administration Can Fix It. 2025, Davis was selected by Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, that is notable, for appointment as a Deputy Director for Mission Integration. Gabbard withdrew her selection after criticism from hawkish Republican lawmakers. Let's pull those articles real quick. And it says, let's see, as of 2025, he is a senior fellow at the Defense Priorities Foundation. Let's look into what that is. He also hosts the Daniel Davis Deep Dive podcast, analyzing war, national security, and politics. Okay, so I need to add that podcast to my list of research. And we'll see, so obviously I'm not going to do that right now, but okay, so looking at defense priorities, and I'm responding to all this in real time. I haven't done this research beforehand. We're just kind of making these discoveries together in real time, and I'm just going to point out things that stick out to me. Okay, so here's the Wikipedia page for defense priorities, which it says that he is a senior fellow, if I'm not mistaken. It says, as of 2025, he is a senior fellow at the Defense Priorities Foundation. So Defense Priorities Foundation, known as Defense Priorities, is an American foreign policy think tank based in Washington, D.C. that advocates for more restrained U.S. foreign policy. Defense Priorities was established in early 2016 by supporters of United States Senator Rand Paul and funded by conservative donors Charles Koch and his brother David Koch. That is not good. I'm not a fan of that. Early leadership included William P. Ruger of the Charles Koch Institute and Edward King of a pro-Paul political action committee. The organization was founded to advance Paul's foreign policy views, which argued for a more prudent, restrained U.S. foreign policy. Defense Priorities publications have advocated for ending Russia's invasion of Ukraine through negotiations, against the arming of rebels during the Syrian civil war, against harsher sanctions on North Korea over its nuclear program, and against deeper military engagement in the Middle East. Defense Priorities has also argued for a weakening of U.S.-Taiwan relations in the political and military realm. So, surface level, I basically agree with all those things, but hard to trust somebody who works for the Koch brothers. And the Koch brothers are definitely not non-interventionists. So it's interesting that they are behind this. They are definitely neocons. So anyway, let's back out of everything we just read there, and let's go to this New York Times article. Eventually, we'll make it back to the original Axios article, but I want to look at this Tulsi Gabbard storyline because I'm trying to better understand some of these things. And Tulsi Gabbard is just one of those characters that when I hear her name come up, if you haven't noticed, she hasn't really been deployed that often in the narrative by Trump. She's almost like operating behind the scenes. And so because she's so selectively been deployed, whenever she is deployed or involved in a story, my ears perk up and I want to know more about it. So here, this is from the New York Times from March 12th, 2025. It says Gabbard drops pick for top intelligence post, a critic of Israel on Gaza. The scuttled appointment highlighted an emerging foreign policy fault line in the new Trump administration. We're not going to read this whole article, but I just kind of want to pick out some pieces. So Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, opted not to name a critic of Israel's war in Gaza to a top post managing briefings for the president after the proposed appointment upset some members of Trump's coalition, according to officials. Officials are familiar with the deliberations. Daniel Davis, a senior fellow at a Washington think tank who is skeptical of American intervention overseas, was undergoing a background check to become a deputy director for mission integration. The official said the post is a powerful job that oversees the compiling of the president's daily brief, a compendium of intelligence assessments that goes to the White House and top policy makers. But news of the proposed appointment generated blowback on the right. A senior administration official told Ms. Gabbard, a senior administration official said Ms. Gabbard reconsidered her choice given the criticism, and other officials confirmed the decision. Mr. Davis is a senior fellow at Defense Priorities, a think tank with funding from Charles Koch that has a number of alumni in key positions in the Trump administration. Defense Priorities has taken a skeptical view of the U.S. military involvement in the Middle East, and that has supported Mr. Trump's efforts to reach an immediate ceasefire in the war in Ukraine. All right, so while we're reading this, let me just pull something up real quick. Let's pull up ChatGPT, and I'm just going to ask ChatGPT to compile a list of all employees for defense priorities, starting with those in the Trump administration and those in Trump's orbit. I want to know who these people are. That'll help me better assess what this thing is. Okay, so it says the abandoned appointment has highlighted an emerging foreign policy fault line in the new administration. The Trump administration has appointed both more hawkish Republicans like Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Michael Waltz, the National Security Advisor, and officials far more skeptical of an American intervention, including Ms. Gabbard. The tug of war over Mr. Davis's appointment has also highlighted the strain among supporters of Mr. Trump's over U.S. support of Israel. Before Mr. Davis's appointment was pulled, the Anti-Defamation League said on Wednesday that the appointment would be extremely dangerous. Isn't that interesting how the ADL is supposed to be like a left-wing organization ostensibly, but they tend to like align with establishment Republicans on pretty much everything. Yeah. Pattern recognition. In a social media post, the group accused Mr. Davis of minimizing Hamas's October 7th, 2023 attack and undermining American support for Israel. Okay, so it says former, let's see, I'm skipping ahead a little bit. Former intelligence officials were also critical of the pick. Mark Polymeropoulos, the hell is that? A former CIA operations officer and a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Well, that is about as deep state as you can find. Said Mr. Davis's positions were outside the ideological mainstream of the Republican Party. Well, I think that's kind of the point, Mr. Polymeropoulos. The hell? What is he, Greek? Polymeropoulos. Looks like this guy's got an X account. So I know I'm just like jumping around going through rabbit holes, but when I find these interesting little characters, I like to investigate them because they kind of help create a... Oh my gosh, look at this guy's website, markpolymeropoulos.com. So yeah, so it's a silhouette, a GIF of like U.S. Special Forces with Apaches flying overhead, right? Even though this guy in the military, I don't know, but he was CIA. It says right here, Mark Polymeropoulos reveals 9 leadership principles from the CIA for your team or organization. Like using his CIA credentials.
South Asia, 2011.
To establish
we're on final approach to a CIA base. There are 20 Americans down below waiting for me, and the threat of indirect fire is real. It is midnight. It is pitch black.
I mean, I don't know if I can stomach this guy. This is like, wow. This guy seems like kind of a chump. Here, let's jump over here.
In front of large audiences is definitely not the norm for me. My life for the last 26 years has been behind the shadows. But now I have chosen to speak publicly about leadership, which has become a great passion of mine. Over time and a great deal of trial and error, I have refined my leadership philosophy that I want to share with others. At first, it was applicable to the intelligence business, but it's certainly applicable to all walks of life. I call this philosophy finding clarity in the shadows. I will share 9 core concepts for outstanding leadership and demonstrate to you how I employed them during my long career at CIA. Each principle builds on the last, and it's designed for real-world applicability, where you operate under time constraints and at times with a lack of situational awareness. I will help you embrace this ambiguity to learn how to lead with no fear. I will also give you what I call the Mad Minute checklist, so you can take these principles and apply them directly to your career. Okay, there is no secret sauce here, just 9.
Yeah, so you get these 9 secrets for how to run your company, but you gotta subscribe to get them. It's all you know how we all feel about content behind paywalls. We're not into that. But it looks like 26 years in the CIA before retiring. So I don't think he was he's not a veteran. He's not in the military. But you saw that they showed a picture of him in his camis, right, decked out with his full kit, with his weapon ready to go, right? But he's not. But he's not military. He's CIA. And it says that he decided to retire in 2019 and go public in June of 2019. I mean, I don't know, man. There were a lot of people from the CIA who just suddenly decided to retire from their clandestine career and like go public. And the whole point was because they all said that they thought they were losing control of like the American people, right? Because of Trump and MAGA. So here is the cipher brief. This looks like this is like a blog or website either run by him or he's maybe affiliated with it. So he's a writer for this. So here's his background. And I'm just looking at some of the, like I can just guess what this is. This is probably going to be a pro-Israel, anti-Saudi Arabia, anti-Muslim, like pro-Zionist writings, I assume. So here's one: Israel's bold assassinations are grabbing attention. Here's another one: we really need to fix the Saudi problem. Okay, shocker. May 25th, 2022. Let's see what he says here. Look at this. I think he's citing Robert Kaplan book. Is he citing the? No, he's citing. I thought that was the Revenge of Geography. So yeah, Deere says everything changed in 2018 when a team of Saudi agents murdered journalist Jamal Khashoggi in Turkey. Khashoggi was a U.S. citizen and an outspoken critic of the Saudi royal family. Turkish officials said the order to kill him came from the highest levels of the Saudi government, while Saudi officials insisted it was a rogue team who carried out the murder. Despite efforts by the Trump administration to prioritize other issues over the horror of Khashoggi's killing, a deep schism formed between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia to include plummeting support for the U.S.-Saudi relationship in Congress. Yeah, so this guy I bet you this guy was involved in the anti-MBS ops where like they were trying to discredit MBS. They're trying to basically, here it says right here, says the Khashoggi affair is a stain on the kingdom, and in their hearts, the U.S. national security sector surely believes that MBS was directly responsible for Khashoggi's tragic death, despite any denials. But at this point, I think there is nothing left to do. MBS will never publicly admit any complicity. We need to accept this, and if we cannot, nothing can move forward. Sometimes in international relations, such difficult choices are necessary. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, this is says what the Saudis should do. MBS should stop personalizing his grievances with the U.S. and with the Biden administration in particular. A recent television show on the Middle East Broadcast Corporation that mocked President Biden's age was cringeworthy. Nothing gets on NBC like this without formal Saudi approval, and this seemed petty. MBS should take the high road and not stoop to such levels. So because MBS was mocking President Biden's age, which is something that everyone in America was doing. I mean, Trump was doing it. Everyone was doing it. That was cringeworthy, and MBS should be ashamed of himself. It says MBS should help on Ukraine, re-OPEC. This is an absolutely critical part of any rapprochement process with the U.S. The price of gas is a serious issue for the American people, and we need Saudi assistance to bring prices down. And Russia benefits from elevated prices. There can be no more waffling on this issue. A clear message must be sent over and over to MBS. Russia is not your friend. The U.S. is. Stop this flirtation with Putin. Is Saudi Arabia really more secure in a relationship with Putin, the war criminal and international pariah? Wow, what a clown. This guy is such a clown. Yeah, so again, this is why we go down the little rabbit holes, these little vignettes to figure out who these people are. Because then now when we let's pull ourselves out of the rabbit hole, because what brought us here was what? Was this article. We're going all the way back to the article from last March about Tulsi Gabbard, and it says former intelligence officials were also critical of the pick of this Davis Daniels guy. Now all of a sudden I'm liking Davis Daniels. If this guy doesn't if this Mark Polymoropoulos or whatever, if he doesn't like Davis Daniels or Daniel Davis, whatever his name is, maybe I do like Daniel Davis, but I'm not going to go there yet. But I mean, if this guy doesn't like it, you know, that tells me something. So it cites him. It says, quote, this is coming from Mark Polymoropoulos. His talking about Daniel Davis. His overt criticism of Israel and total opposition to any military action against Iran seems to run counter to current administration policy, Mr. Polymoropoulos said, talking about the Trump administration. Remember, this guy's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Says allies of Mr. Davis had defended him and said he was no hint of anti-Semitism. Oh, gosh, anti-Semitism. Oh, give me a break. Yes, and then it goes on to talk about ethnic cleansing. Mr. Davis said the removal of people from the territory in Gaza would be considered ethnic cleansing. I mean, based. That's what I think as well. And remember, this is March. This is why Trump runs the operations the way he does. Because let's back up a little bit. We'll cover all this on the Book of Trump when we codify all this into something comprehensible. But March 12th is 1 month after Bibi Netanyahu comes to the White House. That was February 5th. And then Trump sits there and Trump pulls the chair out for him. Trump says, we're gonna take over Gaza. We're gonna kick out all the Gazans and we're gonna build the Gaza the Gaza Riviera, right? So then that gets guys like Mark Polymoropoulos all excited. He gets their jimmies rustled, and they're like, yeah, we got to drive all these people out. Meanwhile, you have sober, clear-eyed people in the room, adults in the room, like Daniel Davis, who is writing, I guess, intelligence reports at the time at some level. And he's saying, if you do this, that would be ethnic cleansing. And he's 100% right. Forcibly removing people from their land for political purposes, for any purpose, is ethnic cleansing, 100%. Says consideration of Mr. Davis for the intelligence post was reported earlier by Jewish Insider. Let's go to that article. See, now I'm like totally captivated by this this whole thing. I'm probably too captivated by it. But so here he is right here. This is him. This is from March 12th. Daniel Davis, a senior fellow at the Isolationist Defense Priorities think tank with a record of strident criticism of Israel, has been tapped as a deputy director of national intelligence. Three sources with knowledge of the selection told Jewish Insider. Davis has also lambasted U.S. support for the war in Gaza as a moral and strategic mistake. Okay, so this is how I think the whole system works. People who are embedded deep inside the government, all right, who are inside the Trump administration, who are just in the proxy, right, in the orbit, they're going to hear about this stuff and they run to their friends in the media. And it's not just, ABC, CBS, Fox News. It's also outlets like this, the Jewish Insider, and they tell them, hey, you need to put an article out warning everybody, warning all of our friends out there that Trump is considering appointing somebody who is anti-Israel. That's what started this whole thing, right? And Tulsi Gabbard is the one doing it, right? We need to run an op against Tulsi Gabbard. Man, that is yeah. So he compared Gaza to a prison. All right, so let's back out of this whole thing because we've gone a little deep down this rabbit hole. But let's go back to the Axios article that led us on this. So it says Cruz. So now we're back talking about Ted Cruz. Cruz also says Vance and Carlson were behind the appointment of Army veteran Daniel Davis, a sharp critic of U.S. support for Israel. So what they're saying says the senator called Davis a guy who viciously hates Israel and said he helped get Davis quickly removed from the job. What they're saying, a Cruz spokesperson said in a statement that the senator is the president's greatest ally in the Senate and battles every day in the trenches to advance his agenda. Quote, those battles include fights over staffers who tried to enter the administration despite disagreeing. Yes, we already read that. Carlson told Axios he didn't have anything to do with this stuff. Okay, interesting. Let's look at Axios because it says Trump did an interview with Axios. I want to look at Barack Ravid's most recent article from Axios because Ravid is always signal. It's not working well. Stand by for processing. I got to go to Ravid's X account. Yeah, because this is the operation here is not against Iran. That's the point that I'm trying to make here is that the operation is not against Iran. The operation is against the bad actors in our government who are trying to push us into a war with Iran, which we don't want to do. I don't care what's going on over there. I don't care how terrible their government is. We don't want to go fight a war against Iran. All right. Now, if they come and they attack us on our soil, that's a totally different story. But we don't want to go over there looking to pick a fight. That is interesting. Uh-oh. Okay, we're gonna have to look into that too. Turkey signing a defense pact with Nigeria. Huh. Oh, and Netanyahu talking about Saudi Arabia. I don't want to watch that too. All right, well, it's like we're getting more and more homework every time I refresh X, it's like more and more homework comes up. But we got to get to the actual place we were trying to go. Yes, so Netanyahu must have just given some speech because they're just like clips of him all over the place. And the clips have a lot of interesting little context to it. So maybe we want to play some of these clips. Every single time I refresh it, there's like another one that I want to share with y'all because it's like, wow, he really said that. Okay. And all of this, so Netanyahu looks like, let me just play, I'll just pull this one up right here. So it says, it looks like this. Okay, so this is in Hebrew. So this is obvious. I think this is probably some sort of a State of the Union address. It says State of Israel's Prime Minister's Office. He's obviously speaking in Hebrew, and it says this is from the Savior, who's a decent. I mean, he puts out stuff that I've whatever. I don't trust anyone on any of these sites. Netanyahu said he is hearing now that the statements that we will allow the reconstruction of Gaza before demilitarization, and this will not happen. He also said he hears that we will bring in Turkish soldiers and Qatari soldiers into Gaza, and this too will not happen, and that he will not allow, and that he will allow the establishment of a Palestinian state in Gaza. This did not happen, and it will not happen. I mean, the Savior, terrible writing. You need to work on your grammar, but everything he writes right here is definitely I've seen reported in Israeli media. So that's all very much accurate. Now, getting back to Barak Ravid, because he's got a lot of signal here, and he's an Israeli journalist. So here's Ravid's feed. And he's tagging Hochstein. Okay, so I don't know if y'all remember Amos Hochstein, right? I remember Just Human and Burning Bright and John talking about him because he was the guy during the Biden administration, a diplomat in the State Department who went and met with MBS like 15 times, right? And so now we're talking about him with Barak Ravid. So let's see what Barak Ravid is saying. Okay, so we'll start with the Iran thing, because we started the show today with the Iran thing. So Barak Ravid is reposting what somebody else quote posted him, and this is the Barak Ravid article I was looking for. So Barak Ravid's post, Scoop, President Trump told me in an interview on Monday that the situation with Iran. So see, I knew the interview was with Barak Ravid. Of course it was. Of course it was, because it's Barak Ravid. President Trump told me in an interview on Monday that the situation with Iran is in flux because he sent a big armada to the region, but thinks Tehran genuinely wants to cut a deal. Okay, so now we got to pull up this archived post, right? So here that is. Here's from Barak Ravid. It says, President Trump told Axios in an interview on Monday that the situation with Iran is in flux because he sent a big armada to the region, but thinks Tehran genuinely wants to cut a deal. Why it matters, Trump came close to ordering a strike on regime targets in Iran earlier this month over the killing of thousands of protesters. Instead, he delayed the decision while also moving military assets to the region. White House officials say an attack is still on the table, though the protests have largely been suppressed. Sources with knowledge of the situation say Trump hasn't made a final decision. He will likely hold more consultations this week and be presented with additional military options. Those options will be enhanced by the arrival of an aircraft carrier strike group to the region. The USS Abraham Lincoln entered CENTCOM's area of responsibility on Monday. What he's saying, in the interview, Trump mentioned his decision to dispatch Blinken. Quote, we have a big armada next to Iran, bigger than Venezuela, Trump said. He declined to discuss the options presented to him by his national security team or which one he prefers. At the same time, he said diplomacy remained an option. Quote, they want to make a deal. I know so. They called on numerous occasions. They want to talk. A senior U.S. official said in a briefing with reporters several hours after Trump spoke to Axios that the White House, quote, is open for business, end quote, when it comes to negotiations with Iran. Quote, if they want to contact us and they know what the terms are, then we're going to have the conversation, end quote, the U.S. official said. The official added that the U.S. conditions for a deal have been transmitted to Iran many times in the last year. Between the lines, some more hawkish members of Trump's circle have urged him to enforce his own red line after he promised to help the protesters and punish the regime. Others have questioned what bombing Tehran would actually achieve and are more intrigued by the idea of using the regime's weakness to push for a deal. U.S. officials say any deal would have to include the removal of all enriched uranium from Iran, a cap on Iran's stockpile of long-range missiles, a change in Iran's policy of supporting proxies in the region, and a ban on independent uranium enrichment in the country. The Iranians have said they're willing to talk, but have not signaled any willingness to accept those terms. Flashback, Trump claimed that prior to the 12-day war last June, Iran's big force of missiles meant it could have launched a damaging surprise attack on Israel. You know what's funny about that? That's exactly what I said 3 years ago on Badlands Media, that the hypersonic missiles are the real threat, not the nuclear stuff. By giving Israel a green light to attack first, Trump claimed he had prevented such a scenario. Quote, they would have attacked, but the first day of the war was brutal for them. They lost their leaders and many of their missiles, Trump said. If there was a different president, Iran would have the nukes and they would have attacked first, he added. Reality check. Prior to the 12-day war, U.S. and Israeli intelligence assessed that if Iran decided to sprint for a nuclear weapon, it would take 2 weeks to enrich enough weapons-grade uranium and 4 to 6 months to produce a crude nuclear device. That is true. That is what they said. Iran's nuclear facilities were badly damaged by U.S. and Israeli strikes, though the status of its uranium stockpile is not fully clear. What to watch? The U.S. military is bracing for an order from Trump. In addition to the Lincoln, the military has sent more F-15 and F-35 fighter jets, more refueling tankers, and additional air defense systems to the region. Again, shout out to General Quast, because, as he says, the F-15 is really the best fighter jet out there that we know about, at least. It's superior to the F-35. So I always like to make note of that. And remember when MBS came and visited, and he showed up in the horse-drawn carriage, remember? And he gets out of the carriage, and everyone's out there to welcome him, and then the planes flew over. It was 3 F-35s and 3 F-15s that flew over the White House. I get autistic about that stuff. I don't know why. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper visited Israel on Saturday to coordinate military plans and potential joint defensive efforts to counter an Iranian attack against Israel, sources said. Because remember, Netanyahu asked Trump to slow down on his escalating rhetoric on Iran, because there was no carrier strike group in the area. The USS Abraham Lincoln was in the Caribbean Sea. This was a few weeks ago. And so Netanyahu was like, I don't think we can defend ourselves. If y'all attack Iran, if anybody attacks Iran, Israel can't defend itself from an Iranian response, which is true. If Iran wanted to go balls to the wall against Israel, it could. And there's very little Israel could do to stop it, which again means that the real power projection in the Middle East is Iran and not Israel, and probably Turkey and probably Saudi Arabia. Certainly when it comes to economics and finance, it's Saudi Arabia, and energy, frankly. All right, so good stuff from Barack Ravid. Let's go back to his X account, because he had some good looking posts that I want to take a look at. So here's a story that he's posting from Haaretz. It says Josh Briner and Eden Solomon report, quote, the security affair currently under investigation concerns the smuggling of goods from Israel into the Gaza Strip. The affair, which involves several security agencies and is being investigated by the Shin Bet and the Central Unit of the Southern District Police, places Shin Bet Chief David Zini in a conflict of interest. Okay. Let's see. I'm just trying to find posts that are relevant to what we're talking about here. Okay, so Amos Harel from Haaretz writes, the return of the body of the last hostage will accelerate the implementation of Phase B in the agreement with the U.S. and will force Netanyahu supporters in the government to confront reality and the true meaning of the agreement, from the survival of Hamas, at least for now, to the open involvement of Qatar and Turkey in the Gaza Strip. So we'll open that article and we'll come back to it in a second. So now here is Barack Ravid reposting a post from Lindsey Graham from 4 hours ago. It says, as previously stated, this is from Lindsey Graham, I am trying to work with the administration and regional partners to prevent a bloodbath in Syria against our Kurdish allies. It is now time for the region to change their ways and man up for decency. To Saudi Arabia, I have tried to work hard to chart a new path for relations between your country, the United States, and the region. I have tremendous respect for many of the changes that have been embraced. However, the kingdom's attack on the United Arab Emirates and their silence regarding the Syrian government's constant assault on the Kurds has to change. Please understand that I am smart enough to know that Saudi Arabia has influence on the Syrian government, and I expect them to use it to keep this region from falling into chaos. To Saudi Arabia, thank you for your attention to this matter. You understand that that was about as overt of a threat as you can get from a U.S. senator to the king of a foreign country, the king being King Salman, the father of MBS, but also his son, the acting ruler of Saudi Arabia. That is about as overt of a threat as you can get. And Barack Ravid reposting that. I don't think that's an endorsement, by the way, by Barack Ravid. I think that's just him being like, hey, everyone should read this. Lindsey Graham is being a psychopath. Once again, he's being a total sociopath. And he's pulling the mask off and showing you who he is. He's always been against MBS. He was the one at the very tip of the spear in the media back in October 2018, saying that because Jamal Khashoggi was brutally killed by the Saudis, which there was no proof of that, we had to cut off relations with Saudi Arabia and MBS needed to be overthrown. That's what Lindsey Graham said. That was one of the ciphers for me. That was when I developed my cipher for MBS. I was like, okay, so people who attack MBS, who was just named in these Q posts, basically, they are the bad guys, right? All right, so Barack Ravid is now quote posting Ophir Dayan, and who says it's happening. And I mean, I wish I could read what this says, but I can't. I feel like I'm like being left out of the joke here, Barack. Am I saying his name right? Is it Barack or is it Barack? See, I can't read that, so I don't know what it says. Okay, so now he's retweeting Ihab Hassan. It says, breaking new Palestinian election law amendment requires all candidates to sign commitment to the PLO and its political program or be barred from participation. PLO's political program is renouncing terrorism, armed attacks against civilians, committing to a political non-militant path, and accepting the framework of international legitimacy and two-state solution. So this condition effectively means no armed factions like Hamas and Islamic Jihad can participate in the elections unless they accept the PLO's political program, renounce terrorism, and commit to international legitimacy, including the two-state solution. I'm going to like that and repost that because this is exactly what I would expect from Mahmoud Abbas. Remember, my thesis has been, pause for 1 second because my computer just came unplugged. I got to make sure that we don't lose power here. 1 second. All right, we're back. Yeah, my thesis has really been that that Mahmoud Abbas is the good actor. He's the one, the earnest peace-seeking actor. He's often labeled by people online as like Israel's puppet, but that couldn't be further from the truth. He's just basically he's in a very tough situation because the Hegelian dialectic, the false paradigm that's been presented, is you either are on the side of Israel, right, or you're on the side of Hamas, which are two violent factions fighting one another for dominion over Palestine. And then you have this third party who's been around much longer than Hamas has, the Palestinian Authority, represented by Mahmoud Abbas, who are earnestly seeking peace, but nobody listens to them because they aren't the exciting militants fighting in an armed conflict. They are the people trying to engage in diplomacy. Okay, so now here's your proof of what I'm saying here, that Barack Ravid is not. I don't think Barack Ravid shills for war. So here he is reposting a post that says, at this hour, a settler attack is taking place in the South Hebron Hills, including arson and reports of injuries. It appears the attack is occurring simultaneously at multiple locations. Now he's reposting somebody else. These all appear to be Israelis that he's reposting. It says, okay, let's say Eric didn't tell Netanyahu a word about Qatar, but after it became clear that Eric himself admitted he received money from Qatar during the war, Why isn't Bibi firing him for hiding it and damaging the trust between them? And instead, the Likud is funding the legal fees of the busy lawyer in Israel. Weird. Yeah, there you go. I mean, that's all right. So now this is the one. I really wanted to play this. All right. I think this is all in Hebrew, but it looks like somebody added English subtitles. It says Netanyahu on Saudi Arabia. Let's listen to what Netanyahu says. All right. You know what? Slow down. Let's hold that thought. Let's hold the thought, everyone. All right. We're going to do, we're going to break. Geopolitics with Ghost. First hour in the book.
I don't say this lightly. This lotion changes people.
My knuckles would actually start to crack. Started using the soft disclosure lotion, and I am very impressed. Even within just a few days, I've noticed a tremendous difference.
That's not a script. That's what happens when something actually works.
It puts the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again.
Yeah, that line keeps coming up. Because when you don't use it, your skin starts acting up.
Every single ingredient in soft disclosure is intentionally chosen. There's no filler ingredients. It is not like this BS product where they have a bunch of ingredients. Every ingredient listed is for a purpose.
Over 65-star reviews for the lotion alone. Not influencers, not actors, just people whose skin finally shut up. Soft disclosure lotion. Once you try it, you'll understand why people won't stop talking about it. Visit softdisclosure.com and use code Badlands and get 10% off.
Hey there, Earthlings. I'm here on the streets of New York to tell you about something that's literally out of this world. You know, traveling between dimensions really takes it out of you, but I've found the perfect solution. MyShroom Vibe can now be your Shroom Vibe. Elevate your frequency. Get microdose capsules, gummies, and chocolate bars at myshroomvibe.com. Use code Badlands for 10% off your order. Trust me, galaxy hopping demands balance, and ours comes from Mother Nature. Organic, not synthetic. It's the real deal. Cy Lee, if you know what I mean. Check it out. Your frequency will thank you. Visit myshroomvibe.com. Organic goodness, not synthetic. Use code Badlands.
Badlanders, you are all familiar with Loaded Gun Coffee. They have been longtime supporters of Badlands, and you may have met them in person at GART. But did you know they are a veteran-ran, family-owned shop in Lake Havasu, Arizona. Every bag of their whole bean coffee delivers a high-octane, patriotic punch of flavor. With a long family history of commitment to freedom, every bag is a testament of pride and honor, from the skilled farmers who cultivate each blend to the roasters that handpick the finest coffee beans from around the world. Loaded Gun Coffee has mastered their unique brewing methods, resulting in the best tasting coffee around. This coffee is smooth and delicious, the perfect way to start your mornings. Get over to badlandsmedia.tv/loaded and use the promo code Badlands to get 10% off your order. If you are in the Lake Havasu area, stop in their newly renovated store and say hi. That is badlandsmedia.tv/loaded, promo code Badlands. Stay loaded with Loaded Gun Coffee. All right. Welcome back, everybody, to Geopolitics with Ghost. I'm your host, Gordon McCormick, the ghost of bass Patrick Henry. Today is January 27th, 2026. This is the second hour of the show that we're going to get into here. We're going to pick up where we left off before the break. Hope everyone is surviving the snowpocalypse that I don't actually think really happened. I mean, we definitely got snow here, and it's frozen into ice, which is kind of a pain to deal with. But, I mean, they were acting like we were going to get like 3 feet of snow, and we got like 6 inches, 8 inches, something like that. And it was all just ice. It was like grains of sand, basically, but ice formed. Like it didn't stick to the trees, didn't stick to the mailboxes, didn't stick to any of that. And then basically just froze over after the sun got on it. But anyway, I do have a rant from last week that I didn't read. So remind me, I will, after we get through this little segment, I'll pull up the rant and we will share it, because my policy is anytime a rant gets missed, I screenshot it. And then I put it lives forever on the Miro mind map. So we got to go look at that. All right, so let's pull up this video that I'm very eager to see. I have not watched this video yet because this was just posted 21 minutes ago. So I'm eager to see what is said here. It says Netanyahu on Saudi Arabia from Amikai Stein. So I'm going to read it. I'm going to leave it muted. I'm going to read it because it's in Hebrew, but it's got English subtitles. All right, so he says, I don't want to be Saudi Arabia's commentator. We follow these things as well. We don't ignore them. And it is clear that we expect anyone who wants to negotiate normalization agreements. Wait, let me back up. Anyone who wants to negotiate normalization agreements and peace agreements with us, not to join efforts that are, how can we say, directed by elements or by an ideology that wants the opposite of peace, essentially attacking the state of Israel, denying the legitimacy of the state of Israel, and nurturing all kinds of bodies that attack the state of Israel. I think this is obvious. And so I would be happy if we had a normalization and peace agreement with Saudi Arabia, assuming that Saudi Arabia wants a normalization and peace agreement with a secure and strong state of Israel. Okay, so what Netanyahu is, he's saying kind of the quiet part out loud, because of course all of his proxies, we just read the Lindsey Graham post, all of his proxies are parroting what he's saying, right? It's like he puts out, he's setting the narrative, and then his surrogates are all reinforcing the narrative at every level. And the narrative, of course, is giving Saudi Arabia an ultimatum. You will bend the knee and accept our terms. You will get normalization and peace with Israel if you accept our terms. We're not going to compromise, though, and meet in the middle with you. And of course, those terms are no two-state solution. Palestine belongs to us, and we will do whatever the hell we want when it comes to imposing our will on the region. That is not a peace agreement, by the way. That is capitulation. That is surrendering to the barbarians at the gate to avoid being slaughtered by them. That is what Netanyahu is basically presenting to MBS. And this is something that I've expected for years now. I expected there to be a point where Netanyahu and MBS were going to be forced into a situation where they have to square off. But how convenient that in this moment, MBS is not alone. Obviously, he has the support of the international community, but literally he has the support of President Trump with the Board of Peace, right? And all the people on the Board of Peace and all the people who support the Board of Peace. But of course, he has Putin and Xi, frankly, on his side as well. Okay, so let's keep going through Barack Ravid's timeline, because there's some interesting stuff here. He is quote posting somebody else, Israel Matzaf, but he says Amos Hochstein, President Biden's advisor, responded to me, and this is so he's reading a quote from Netanyahu, or from Amos Hochstein. It says, quote, Netanyahu is both not telling the truth and showing ingratitude toward President Biden, who saved Israel at its most vulnerable moment in its history. That's interesting. Amos Hochstein, by the way, Jewish. Always important to point that stuff out whenever you're dealing with American officials who, or even non-American officials who are ostensibly defying the diaspora, defying Netanyahu, defying the Israeli government. Because I can't imagine that's an easy thing to do as a Jew. to stand up to them, because then you have the entire Jewish community, or at least the elites, coming after you, right? And then Barak Ravid, it says President Biden's advisor, and then he tags him, Amos Hochstein, told me in response, Netanyahu is both not telling the truth and ungrateful to a president that literally saved Israel. It's the most vulnerable moment. So I want to read the two posts he's quote posting here. The first one is from Israel Matzov. It's translated from Hebrew. It says, Netanyahu, this is, I suppose they're quoting Netanyahu. It says, at a certain point in the war, we didn't have enough ammunition and fighters fell. Part of this loss of ammunition also came as a result of the embargo. That changed beyond recognition with the entry of President Trump, but we have reached security maturity. We must have a robust and independent arms industry. And what's interesting is that this is definitely true. What Barak Ravid is saying is true here. Back during the Biden administration and back in 2024, Netanyahu and his surrogates were putting out the narrative that Biden was blocking shipments of bombs to Israel. Right. And then like the anti-Israel online contingent, the Groypers, were all like being like, oh, this is based. I even was like, this could be like a devolution proof. Right. And maybe it was like, maybe that was actually happening. But Amos Hochstein, the guy who's being referenced here, finally went public and said everything Netanyahu is saying is a lie. We have given them everything they've asked for on the schedule that was predetermined long before this moment. The fact that Netanyahu is saying we're not shipping the stuff quick enough, this is all set like a preset schedule that was set a long time ago. That was as I recall, that's what Amos Hochstein had said in response to all that. And of course, Amos Hochstein is, like, as far as I can tell, within like the Netanyahu regime, is basically viewed as like a traitor, and he's like an Arab sympathizer as far as they're concerned. He's a left winger, he's a liberal who's too sympathetic to the Arab cause, right? So now he is quote posting. He's saying the exact same. Barak Ravid is saying the exact same quote from Amos Hochstein, but he is quote posting another person, Guy Elster, who appears to be Israeli with the Hebrew name in his title. And it says, in a rare press conference, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu claims that soldiers were killed during the war in Gaza from a lack of ammunition due to a partial embargo that was imposed by the Biden administration. Yeah, and so Barak Ravid's correcting the record in both those situations, in both of those statements, but the same statement. But okay, so then here's Barak Ravid with his own post. It says, summary of Netanyahu government's handling of Hamas in Gaza in his own words. 1, they carried out a massacre on us with flip-flops. 2, Israel didn't have enough weapons. And 3, the Qatari money was meant to prevent a humanitarian collapse. Okay, I need to go, not right now, but I need to go listen to this whole press conference that, I guess it wasn't a State of the Union. I guess it was some kind of press conference. And I would imagine that Netanyahu probably did that because he feels pressured to make public statements. Okay, so here is like now we have a news article from Times of Israel on this press conference. So let's go check that out real quick, and then we'll kind of get back to some of the things that I had been looking at that I was planning to present. And that would be this one. So Netanyahu, no Gaza reconstruction before disarmament. Israel will maintain security control. I don't think Trump's going to have a problem necessarily with that statement, because that's kind of what Trump has said too. You needed to disarm. I have seen statements from Hamas about this that I think are probably worth posting. So there's him meeting with the Board of Peace director. Here's him saying we don't need elections. And I'm looking for the one that, I guess they haven't written an article about it yet. They just put the headline. Yes, they just have the video. Okay, so let's look at a few of these other headlines that are coming out right here. So here's Netanyahu meeting in Jerusalem with the Board of Peace top Gaza envoy. That would be Nikolay Mladenov. Who is this? Nikolay. Interesting cat. Okay, we're gonna have to look into Nikolay. Uh-oh, the internet's bugging out a little bit. Bear with me for a second. Waiting for things to load. All right, so it says I have lost. Yeah, I'm getting that message that StreamYard has lost the audio. So I'm going to reshare my StreamYard. So just in case I do play a video, the video will actually play. And I got to go back here and throw it up on the screen. Okay, so Nikolay Inladinov. He's Bulgarian. Oh yeah, okay. I remember seeing this guy's picture. So here he is. He's Bulgarian. Bulgar, huh? We got a Bulgar here running the show for President Trump. I'm just trying to see if anything about his background sticks out to me. Uh-oh. He worked for George Soros. Between 1996 and 1998, Imladinov was program director for the Open Societies Foundation in Sofia, followed by an appointment as a program coordinator to be in the social department of the World Bank for Bulgaria. Yeah, that's interesting. And that would explain there have been a lot of allegations that there are George Soros people involved in this thing. All right, but let's not get off track here. Let's go back to, so that's just the headline. It's just they're just meeting to talk about the board piece, I suppose. And then we have a few other headlines. So I saw this. This was one of the other clips that I saw that I was going to share, but they've already written an article on it. Netanyahu, Israel needs stability, not an early election. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that the last thing Israel currently needs is to hold an election. In response to a question on whether the next national vote will happen on schedule during his press conference. Asked whether he believes the Haredi draft law and state budget will pass in their second and third readings and that the election will be held on schedule, Netanyahu replies, "That is both my aspiration and my hope, and I think everyone knows what a sensitive and unusual situation we are in. The last thing Israel needs in this situation is an election. We need stability. I don't need to spell it out. It's understood. I hope everyone will understand the national responsibility required at this moment. That's all I can say for you. Under the law, a national election must be held by the end of October this year. If the budget fails to pass or the Knesset disperses, an election will be held earlier." So as of right now, they're looking at an election in like 9 months, basically. And the question was, are we going to hold one sooner than that? All right, so PM on Saudi pivot to Qatar, Turkey, potential partners shouldn't support those who delegitimize Israel. I think that's kind of what we just read. I mean, we just listened to this clip. But that was obviously pointed at Saudi Arabia, and it was really indirectly pointed at Turkey and Qatar. Okay. So now I'm going to close down some of these tabs because I got way too many tabs open. And we can now pivot back to some of these other news articles that I had. Okay, so where to go next? Let's talk about. All right, well, let's go here. So this is the clip I was going to share. Okay, God bless RT. They got English subtitles, or English overdub, rather. It's not letting me share my audio. It keeps telling me that my audio is not being shared. So I don't know if this is, I mean, StreamYard is just being a pain in the ass today. Let me see if I'm going to try one more time. Stop sharing, stop sharing. Share screen. Oh God, we're getting some issues here. StreamYard is freaking out. I'm really tempted to back out and come back in. I just don't want to end the stream if that happens. I mean, my StreamYard screen is now like, my screen is this big now. It's like something's very, very odd is going on here. All right, let me see. How do we handle this? All right, things are not looking good on StreamYard. I'm going to refresh my page, which means it's probably going to pull me out real quick. Everyone just stand by. I think this is the only way to make this work. Stand by 1 second.
All right, we're back. We're back. I think we're good. Things look much better on my end. I think we're good. All right, so let's try to make this work now.
That everyone knows what a sensitive situation and we are in. The last thing that Israel needs right now is elections. We need stability, and I don't have to explain. That's obvious.
Okay, but this is the one I really want to listen to, is the Iran attack.
And the Iranian axis is trying to rebuild itself. That's true, but we will not allow it. If Iran makes that terrible mistake and attacks Israel, we will respond mightily in a way that Iran has never seen before. And the Iranian axis is trying to rebuild itself. That's true, but we will not allow it.
Okay. All right. So now I want to shift, let's talk about ISIS. Let's talk about Iraq. Let's talk about what's happening over there. So we have right here. Okay. Washington Post: Iraqi spy chief warns of re-emerging threat from ISIS as its ranks swell. Hamid al-Shatri, Iraq's head of intelligence, said in a rare interview that he sees dramatic growth in the number of Islamic State militants next door in Syria. Okay. Baghdad over the past year, Iraqi spy chief Hamid al-Shatri says he has been warily tracking the growing numbers of Islamic State militants over the border in Syria. From an estimated 2,000 fighters, the ranks of the Islamic State in Syria have swelled in little more than a year to 10,000, according to Shatri, the head of Iraqi intelligence, speaking in a rare interview in Baghdad this month. His figure could not be confirmed elsewhere, for instance, with the U.S. military, and the latest UN Security Council report pointed to a far less precipitous rise, with an estimated 3,000 Islamic State members in Syria and Iraq combined as of August. This certainly does not pose a danger to Iraq because ISIS, whether it's in Syria or Iraq or anywhere else in the world, is one organization, and it will certainly try to find ground once more in order to launch attacks, he said. As Iraq's point person for Syrian security issues, Shatri has traveled to Damascus 3 times over the past year for discussions with Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara, that's al-Jilani. Dramatic developments in northeastern Syria, where Syrian government troops pushed last week to retake territory long held by Kurdish-led forces, have sharpened concerns over a renewed Islamic State threat. During the fight, chaos broke out at prisons in the region where thousands of the group's members had been held and sent escaped militants fleeing into the desert. Many were rearrested, but the Iraqi government quickly deployed thousands of troops and militia members to reinforce its border with Syria. Okay, so basically these prisons where ISIS members were being kept were attacked. The prisoners were all freed, and then they went running into the desert. But at the same time, like, the official authorities are all saying, the UN is saying, oh, there's no precipitous rise. I mean, yeah, thousands of ISIS prisoners escaped and are, ran into the desert and are probably like picking up arms right now. But I mean, that doesn't mean that there's a big resurgence of ISIS or anything. What? How can we be this stupid? Well, they're not stupid. They're just evil. In Iraq, a country still traumatized by its years of fighting to dislodge Islamic State militants and their self-declared caliphate a decade ago, the new scenes have brought back painful memories. They have also given a rallying cry to powerful Iranian-backed Shia militias that once fought the group amid U.S. pressure to disarm them. Shatri said the militants who joined the Islamic group in Syria over the past year, and by the way, let me just point that out, Iranian-backed Shia militias that once fought ISIS. It's really important to point that out because we're told in America, because most people in America are woefully ignorant as to what is going on around the world. We're told that Iran backs ISIS. That's what we're told all the time. We're told that. Okay. The problem with that is that Iran is the one like Shia country in the world. I mean, Lebanon is also technically Shia. And Iraq has like a 50% Shia population, but Iran is like 90% Shia, right? It's the one country in the world that has that. Everywhere else is basically is Sunni. Only 10% of all Muslims in the world are Shia. All right. Shia and Sunni Muslims have been fighting since the end of the first caliphate, which was 4 different leaders. You had the Prophet Muhammad and then 3 of his followers. And when the 3rd follower was murdered, and I've gone and looked into all this, it was kind of like the adoptive younger brother, the adoptive son, basically, of the Prophet Muhammad. There was a disagreement over who should, how the line of succession should be handled. And one group thought that any leader of the caliphate should always be, the leader of Islam should always be the blood of the Prophet Muhammad. And those people became the Shia. And then the Sunni, which is like 90% of all Muslims, they believe it should be meritocracy. Whoever the most capable leader is should become the leader. It doesn't matter. Like bloodlines are irrelevant. That stuff doesn't matter. Right. So like that is basically the most basic simplification of the Shia Sunni divide. And they've been at war with each other on and off, moments of peace and moments of war since then. So Iran is Shia again, Saudi is Sunni, so is like basically the rest of the Middle East, and ISIS is a perversion of Sunni, like the radicalization of Sunni, done mostly I think by MI6 in the Muslim Brotherhood, and so they are Sunni, like it's Salafi Islam, it's Wahhabism, like Sunni Islam, but it's still Sunni. So how would Iran, a Shia government, back a Sunni movement like ISIS? That doesn't make any sense because it's very simple. Sunni and Shia fight one another. They don't work together, right? Not traditionally. And yet the media says, yeah, but don't overthink that stuff. What do you mean don't overthink it? Like that's just reality. Also, Assad is like he was always a friend of Iran, right? Iran always backed Assad. Isn't that like one of the core arguments that was made to overthrow Assad is that he was in league with Iran, right? So if ISIS was fighting against Assad for however many years, 14 years, because their objective was to overthrow Assad, right? Why would Iran send a militia into the Syrian desert to overthrow their own ally, their own puppet, as Lindsey Graham would tell you? That doesn't make any sense. It's all very simple. Iran and Assad are friends. Sunni and Shia hate each other. And yet we're told that Iran backs ISIS. That's not reality, actually. Okay? ISIS was created by the U.S. State Department and Mossad and NATO to overthrow Assad. Okay. Shatri said the militants who joined the Islamic group in Syria over the past year include men who once aligned with Shura, that's al-Jilani, previously the head of an al-Qaeda affiliate, who have grown disaffected by the political direction of the president has taken. That's an important line. Shatri said the militants who joined ISIS in the past year in Syria include men who were once aligned with the current president, Jilani, who was previously the head of an al-Qaeda affiliate, also ISIS, but they have grown disaffected by the political direction that he has taken since becoming president. So that is a signal to me. It says tensions between foreign fighters once among Shura's ranks, who used to number in the thousands, have increased as government forces have made arrests. So that is reinforcement of the speculation that Burning Bright and I and others have made that Jilani is not working for his old paymasters. Whoever he was serving before, which was probably NATO, Israel, the U.S. deep state, MI6, etc. He's not working for them anymore, clearly, because he's going after his old friends. He's going after ISIS, right? Shatri said his figure also includes defectors to the Islamic State from other militant factions such as Jabhat al-Nusra and Ansar al-Sunnah, but does not count extremists still loyal to those groups. The group has also succeeded in recruiting large numbers of Arab tribesmen, he added, especially in Sunni Muslim areas that were until recently controlled by Kurdish forces. In 2024, U.S. Central Command estimated that some 2,500 Islamic State fighters remained at large in Syria and Iraq, but has not given an update since. A CENTCOM spokesman declined to comment for this article or provide figures. A Syrian foreign ministry official declined to comment on the figures provided by Shatri. Quote, ISIS has definitely taken advantage of the security collapse of the Syrian regime, end quote, said Orwa Ajob, a doctoral candidate at Malmö University in Sweden who studies the group, but there seems to be no major shift in its capacities or the scale of its attacks, with the militants mostly carrying out small hit-and-run operations that take advantage of security blind spots, he said. The rising concerns come just as the last U.S. troops remaining in the Ain al-Assad base in Iraq's western Anbar province departed this month. I want to see where that is. I'm just asking Google to pull that up for me, or whatever, Brave to pull that up for me. Okay, and it says, ending a deployment focused on helping Iraqi forces fight the Islamic State. Since the formal handover of the Ain al-Assad base, U.S. forces are now confined to another base in Erbil in the semi-autonomous Kurdish region in Iraq's north. They are due to end their mission there at the end of the year, in line with Iraqi demands. It's too early to judge the impact of the U.S. withdrawal from Ain al-Assad, said Shatri, but he acknowledged it could affect joint U.S.-Iraq security operations, particularly in remote areas like the rugged Hamrin Mountains, where some of the estimated 500 Islamic State fighters left in Iraq are believed to remain. The most recent joint operation against the Islamic State in Iraq took place in March, targeting and killing the militant group's second in command, Abdallah Maki Musli al-Rifai. Yeah, whatever. Rifa, not going to work here anymore. Also known as Abu Khandija, CENTCOM reported. Members of Iraq's elite Falcon cell are also carried out an airborne raid inside Syria late last year. Iraqi authorities said at the time it came as U.S. forces were stepping up strikes against Islamic State militants following an attack that killed two U.S. soldiers and a Syrian policeman. We all remember hearing about the two soldiers that were killed, and Lindsey Graham was saying, "Oh, we got to go back into Syria. Oh, we got to go back in. We should start fighting people again." All right. So I want to talk about this guy al-Maliki. Okay. So first, let's go to this map. Here's the Al-Assad Air Base. It looks like it is in Iraq. So it's definitely in Iraq. Yeah, so it's Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. So now I want to look at the Al-Masiki emergence. I'm looking at the best source for this. We'll just take a look at this one. The Sunday Guardian. I don't know. Sumit Kumar. Who is Nouri al-Maliki, Iraq's former prime minister who rose after Saddam Hussein's execution, and what his return could mean during the Iran-U.S. tension? It says Iraq's fragile political landscape is once again at a turning point after months of uncertainty, etc. Yeah, this is a very, very scary time. We got it. Who is Nouri al-Maliki? Nouri al-Maliki is one of the most influential and polarizing figures in modern Iraqi politics. Now 75, he first rose to prominence after the 2003 U.S.-led invasion that toppled Saddam Hussein. A longtime member and leader of the Islamic Dawa Party, al-Maliki became prime minister in 2006 at a time when Iraq faced violent insurgency, political fragmentation, and institutional collapse. He went on to serve 2 consecutive terms, making him Iraq's longest-serving leader since the invasion. Supporters credit him with centralizing authority and keeping the state intact during turbulent years. Critics argue that his leadership deepened sectarian divisions and weakened democratic institutions. How Nouri al-Maliki connected with Saddam Hussein. Nouri al-Maliki served as Iraq's prime minister between 2006 and 2014 and emerged as one of the most influential Shia leaders in the country's post-Saddam era. A longtime adversary of Saddam Hussein, he played a decisive role in the former dictator's fate by authorizing his execution in 2006. Wow, I didn't know that. That is notable. We need like somebody write that one down. Nearly 2 decades later, in early 2026, al-Maliki has once again been nominated by Iraq's largest Shia alliance as a contender for the top post, a move that has raised alarm in Washington because of his close ties with Iran. Al-Maliki's hostility towards Saddam's Ba'athist regime dates back decades. In 1979, he fled Iraq to avoid persecution, spending years in exile in Iran and Syria while actively opposing Saddam's rule from abroad. After rising to power following the U.S.-led invasion, al-Maliki presided over one of the most symbolic moments in modern Iraqi history. As prime minister, he approved Saddam Hussein's death sentence and rejected calls to postpone the execution, which was carried out on December 30th, 2006. Although he stepped down in 2014 after the rise of ISIS, al-Maliki never disappeared from Iraq's political landscape. By retaining influence within powerful Shia blocs, he has now positioned himself for a possible political comeback in 2026, reigniting debate over Iraq's future direction and its regional alignments. Why is al-Maliki back now in the spotlight? On Saturday, the Shia Coordination Framework, an alliance that holds parliamentary majority, announced al-Maliki as its nominee for prime minister, citing his political and administrative experience as his role in managing the state. The move sets the stage for negotiations to form a new government at a time when Iraq faces mounting pressure from competing regional and global powers. Although al-Maliki stepped down in 2014 after ISIL seized large parts of Iraq, he never left the political core. Instead, he remained a key power broker, leading the state of law coalition and shaping alliances behind the scenes. Okay, so that's interesting. I don't know a ton about this guy. I really have just started reading into him like yesterday. Maybe the day before yesterday. Okay, so let's pull up the article about Marco Rubio, because Rubio had some things to say about this guy. Stand by for that. We got... Is it this one? Not that one. This one? Not that one. We are going to look at that one, though. This one. Not that one. Okay, so Marco Rubio Maliki. Easy enough to find it. Okay, so we'll just, I guess the Korea Herald is the first thing that pops up. It's fine. We'll just read the Korea Herald. Not to be confused with the Daily Herald. This is probably, I would imagine this is probably John Herald's doppelganger in Korea. Rubio warns Iraq on Iran ties as Maliki sets return. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio warned Iraq Sunday against a pro-Iranian government as the expected return of Nouri al-Maliki as prime minister stirs Washington's concerns. Maliki, who left power in 2014 following heated pressure from the U.S., has been chosen by Iraq's largest Shia bloc, which would put him in line to be nominated prime minister. Rubio, in a telephone call with incumbent Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani, voiced hope for the next government will work to make Iraq a force for stability, prosperity, and security in the Middle East. Quote, the secretary emphasized that a government controlled by Iran cannot successfully put Iraq's own interests first, keep Iraq out of regional conflicts, or advance the mutually beneficial partnership between the United States and Iraq, Rubio said, according to U.S. State Department spokesperson Tommy Pigott. A pro-Iranian government in Iraq would be a rare boon for Tehran's clerical state after it suffered major setbacks at home in the region. The Islamic Republic has killed thousands of Iranians. Yeah, whatever. An Iraqi political source told Agence France Press that the U.S. has conveyed that it holds a negative view of previous governments led by former Prime Minister Maliki. In a letter, U.S. representatives said that while the selection of the prime minister is an Iraqi decision, the United States will make its own sovereign decisions regarding the next government in line with American interests. The U.S. wields key leverage over Iraq as the country's oil export revenue is largely held at the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. in an arrangement reached after the 2003 U.S. invasion that toppled Saddam Hussein. Yeah, just to remind everybody, Iraq didn't have a central bank controlled by the Rothschilds until we went in there, killed Saddam Hussein, and installed our own central bank, right? The Rothschilds went in there and took over. Chief among U.S. demands is that Iraq prevent a resurgence of Shia armed groups backed by Iran. Soudani, who took office in 2022, has won U.S. confidence through his delicate efforts to curb violence by the groups. Maliki initially took office in 2006 with support of the United States, as he strongly backed U.S. military efforts against al-Qaeda in Iraq and other Sunni militants. But the U.S. eventually soured on Maliki, believing he pushed an excessive sectarian agenda that helped give rise to the Islamic State extremist movement. Iraq's parliament meets Tuesday to elect a new president who holds a largely ceremonial role, but will appoint a prime minister. Okay, so basically they're going to elect a president who's going to appoint a prime minister, and right now the favorite in the clubhouse is this guy Maliki. Now, what's interesting is these other stories that I mentioned I wanted to pull up. So I mentioned this on the Badlands Daily this morning, but here's another article from the New York Times from a week ago, and it says U.S. starts moving ISIS detainees from Syria to Iraq. The U.S. military said it has transferred 150 and could eventually move as many as 7,000 Islamic State fighters out of prisons in Syria's northeast to Iraq as the Syrian government wrestles for control of the region from Kurdish-led forces. Okay, so the U.S. military began transferring Islamic State prisoners from the northeast Syria to Iraq on Wednesday amid growing concern that thousands of former fighters and their family members could escape from detention as the Syrian government and Kurdish-led forces vie for control of the area. Yeah, so we just heard that some of these prisons are being attacked and the prison cells are all being opened up and the ISIS fighters are all being left or are all escaping into the desert. So I guess the U.S. military is moving the detainees that they have still in custody to Iraq out of Syria. The U.S. Central Command, which oversees U.S. military operations in the Middle East, said in a statement that American forces had already transported 150 fighters for the Islamic State, also known as ISIS, from a detention facility in northeastern Syria to an unspecified secure location in Iraq. The military said as many as 7,000 detainees could ultimately be moved from Syrian custody to Iraqi-run facilities. Quote, "We are closely coordinating with regional partners, including the Iraqi government, and we sincerely appreciate their role in ensuring the enduring defeat of ISIS," said Admiral Brad Cooper, the head of U.S. military forces in the Middle East. Facilitating the orderly and secure transfer of ISIS detainees is critical to preventing a breakout that would pose a direct threat to the United States and regional security. The transfer effort reflected growing concern about the security of detention sites in northeastern Syria, which for years have been guarded by the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF. The group has come under assault during the past week during a lightning offensive by Syrian government troops. But over the past 2 days, fresh bouts of violence have erupted around prisons holding Islamic State detainees as Kurdish forces withdrew and the Syrian government forces moved in. As many as 200 detainees escaped from one of these prisons. Those prisons, al-Shaddadi, according to a U.S. military official who spoke on the condition of anonymity. The turmoil stoked fears among U.S. and regional officials of a wider prison break in northeastern Syria. Under a fragile ceasefire, the SDF has agreed to relinquish control of prisons and other critical infrastructure as part of a long-awaited deal to integrate Kurdish-held regions into the Syrian state. Despite Washington's public support for Syria's new president, Ahmed al-Shara, the move appeared to underscore lingering doubts in Washington over the government's ability to ensure stability or security. The U.S. military official who spoke on the condition of anonymity said the transfers were being carried out urgently over days rather than weeks, amid concerns about whether Syrian government forces could safely manage the detainees. For years, the SDF was Washington's chief ally in Syria, backed by U.S. air power, funding, and intelligence as the Kurdish-led militia steered the ground fighting against the Islamic State. Steered the ground fight against the Islamic State. But on Tuesday, the U.S. Special Envoy to Syria, Thomas J. Barak Jr., indicated that Washington no longer needed the group in that role, marking a major shift in American foreign policy. Okay, so let's see. Here is that deal that they're talking about. So Syrian government and Kurdish-led forces agree to merge after clashes. This is from January 18th. And it talks about how the Kurds are going to integrate into the, I remember talking about this a few weeks ago, maybe I was writing about it. The Kurds are going to integrate into the Syrian society, the Syrian military, Syrian government, etc. Now, this is a significant development because it would have marked a pivotal milestone in Syrian history, modern Syrian history, because the Kurds, as the article explained, have been the allies of Israel in the United States forever. Colonel Tanner Watkins talks about how when she was stationed over in the Middle East, she was embedded with the Kurds in Turkey, right? Let's just look at it. Let's pull the map up because maps make this stuff so much easier to understand. I was just stalling so that the mind map would load. Here's the mind map now loaded. You can see the various maps. Okay, so here is probably I think this is probably the most modern map that I have of like the political situation in Syria. It's from a year ago, February 2025. Next to it, I have a map of Kurdistan. So here's a map of like where the Kurds inhabit the areas of the Middle East. You can see they're mostly in Turkey, actually, right? They're mostly in Turkey, in Iran, but also in Iraq. It's these mountains, whose name escapes me, but this mountain range that runs from Turkey all the way down to the Persian Gulf. But you can see they really are just in this sliver of northeastern Syria. However, since the Arab Spring of 2011, the Kurds basically have pushed up and controlled, as of a year ago, everything that's yellow. So they went up and pushed all the way to the Euphrates and took control of everything that's yellow here. Everything east of the Euphrates in Syria is basically under Kurdish control. This purple, I believe, is Turkish-backed, the Turkish army and the SNA. The SDF are the Kurds that we just mentioned. The green are al-Shura, like that's Jelani, and then this black, like the diagonal lines, that's ISIS. Okay, so you can see that all of the American bases are in eastern Syria, like in Kurdistan. Those are our allies. You can see how we established a lot of bases down here along the Euphrates River. And then the one base that we have really like west of the Euphrates is down here at Tamph, right? Right on the border where the Jordan meets Iraq and Syria. That's where, Jordan's a longtime ally. And then of course we've been in Iraq for the past 30 years since Desert Storm. In some capacity, we've really been there since the invasion of Iraq in 2003. So anyway, I'm laying out the geography here. So this agreement that they were talking about would basically take all of these forces in the yellow, the Kurds, and merge them into the green, right, which represents a peace deal between long historic enemies. And so they're saying that this prison, which was somewhere over here, I forget what the name of it was, that is these prisons that are in the yellow. As the Kurds are pulling back away from the Euphrates River, the prisons that they control are like the ISIS guys are being released. Now, I got to go check the narrative, what's being told to us. I would imagine that we're probably being told that it's Jelani that's releasing the ISIS guys, because that would make sense, right? That he's a former ISIS fighter. However, he also, over the past year, has been helping Russia and the U.S. bomb ISIS and round up all these ISIS guys, his ostensible friends, right? So I want to see if we can. So here is, I just found this as I'm opening up. I'm trying to find Lindsey Graham's rhetoric. So here is Erdogan, and he says on Syria, he says there can be no state within a state and no separate armed force within Syria. And the Kurds have always been historic enemies also of Turkey, because if you go back to the map, right, they control basically a quarter of the geography in Turkey, and they've always been pushing for self-governance and autonomy. So they want like their own country, basically, which makes them a destabilizing force for the Turkish government. So as we're moving these ISIS guys out of Syria, these ISIS guys are being freed. My guess is they're being freed by the Kurds. Like the New York Times is going to tell us that the Kurds are fighting ISIS, but that I don't know how true that actually is. I think the Kurds were always fighting against Assad, and ISIS was also fighting against Assad. And while they may not have been overt allies, they certainly were like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? Like the Kurds and ISIS, they both wanted to overthrow Assad for different reasons. But it's because the Kurds wanted autonomy east of the Euphrates River, and ISIS basically wanted to control Damascus and all of Syria, like the rest of Syria. So anyway, I mean, that puts them, I would say, in like a fragile alliance, right? Okay, so here, now we go to this. It says January 25th, Baghdad says it will prosecute Islamic State militants being moved from Syria to Iraq. Baghdad says it will prosecute and try militants from ISIS. Syrian troops seized the sprawling Al-Hol camp, housing thousands, mostly families of ISIS fighters. Let's see, from the Kurdish-led force, which withdrew as part of a ceasefire. Troops last Monday also took control of a prison in the northeastern town of Shadadeh, from where some ISIS detainees had escaped during the fighting. Syrian state media later reported that many were recaptured. Okay, so let's look up where that is. Let's go to Google Maps. And let's look up Shadadeh, Syria. Shadadeh. Okay, so that's generally where I kind of expected it to be. It's right here. So there's the Euphrates. So it's like south of Al-Hasaka, right here. So so the Kurds are pulling back from here, and this is where the prison is, where they escaped from. Okay. Let's get back to that article. So they're saying that they're going to prosecute all these people. Baghdad is saying they're going to prosecute the ISIS. This Maliki guy is the stage is set for him to come back into power, for him to restore relations with Iran. That's a historic potential moment here because remember, 1979, the Ayatollah comes into power. The Shah is overthrown. Saddam Hussein is in power in Iraq. In 1980, we, the United States, illegally transferred chemical weapons to Saddam Hussein. We sold him chemical weapons, which was a violation of a international weapons treaty that was signed in 1975 that said anybody who owns chemical weapons cannot transfer them to anybody else. You cannot create chemical weapons, new ones, but there were a lot of chemical weapons floating around left over from World War I. And we basically sold all these chemical weapons to Saddam Hussein in 1980. And then we encouraged him to use those weapons against Iran, which he did when they fought a war in the 1980s. We also sold weapons to Iran using Israel as the middleman. That was known as the Iran-Contra affair. We then took the cash from the revenue from those arms deals and then gave it to Contras in Nicaragua to overthrow the government there. That was all part of Operation Condor. The Iran-Contra affair again. So we were selling weapons to both sides, Iraq and Iran. Those were the two largest militaries at the time in the Middle East, the two biggest powers in the Middle East. And then we encouraged them to destroy one another, which they, of course, did in one of the most, and probably the most brutal war of the 21st century. We then turned around 15 years later, 20 years later, whatever, in 2003 and said, hey, Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. He has chemical weapons. We need to go in there and stop him. And we knew he had chemical weapons because we were the ones who gave him the chemical weapons, right? Yeah. So that's how that whole thing. And we basically sold. It's like you sold the guy the drugs, the bag of cocaine, and then you went and you told the police, hey, that guy's got a bag of cocaine. You better go search his house and arrest him, right? Like that's basically what we did to Saddam Hussein. Okay, and then this Maliki guy comes into power, and then we sour on him because I guess he wasn't going along to get along with the agenda. Okay. And so now we need to go back to this story. Boom. Syrian government solidifies grip on nation after clash with U.S.-backed militias. This is from over a week ago. Damascus has announced a plan to further control its over its state institutions and oil fields. Syrian government in Damascus announced a deal with U.S.-backed Kurdish militias on Sunday that strengthens its control over northeastern parts of the country. So that this is the same deal that we were talking about before. Now, the development in that deal is this one. So now we get U.S. mulling complete troop withdrawal from Syria. Washington is reportedly considering the option after Damascus reasserted control over territories held by U.S.-backed Kurdish militias. So now the U.S. is considering a complete withdrawal of its troops from Syria. The Wall Street Journal has claimed, citing unnamed officials. Right. So now we're talking about we're going to fully pull out of Syria, the full pullout. And as this is happening, ISIS is now reemerging. Right. So ISIS is now reemerging. Jelani's being challenged, and as this Iraqi government switch is going to come, and then the Marco Rubio is telegraphing to the Iraqi government, you better not get in bed with Iran. So this is all pretty fascinating because when you look at everything like in totality, we also have ISIS emerging in a place that we've been talking about a lot in Africa, and that's this story. Islamic State backed militants killed dozens in Central Africa. Rights group the Allied Democratic Force attacked a village in DR Congo Sunday morning, burning 15 men alive and executing others, a rights group has said. An armed group linked to Islamic State, which is ISIS, killed at least 25 civilians in an attack in the northeastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, a local human rights group has alleged. According to the Convention for the Respect of Human Rights, the Allied Democratic Forces, ADF, attacked Apakulu, a village in Ituri province, early Sunday morning and set fire to a house in which 15 men were trapped. 7 others were executed along the road. 3 people had been killed on Saturday in the communities of Ahobo and Mangualo, the group reports. I want to look up where these places are. Stand by for processing. Why don't you want to tell me where that is, Google? All right, here it is. Okay, so this is that first one, I think. Aholo? They're giving me the Lola Ya Bonobo Sanctuary. I don't know if that sounds right. Ahobo and Mangala. Let's look at a map. So Apakulu is the village. So maybe I can look up Apakulu, because what I'm trying to get at here is I want to overlay this with where M23 is operating. So we have what? That's not it. Apakulu. In the Ituri province. Ituri province. Here it is. Okay. What? I'm getting some mixed signals here. One map is saying that it's down here by Lake Albert, and then another map is saying that it's like in the northern part. Okay. But the point is Apakulu. Just bear with me here for a second. I just want to see if these guys are even within striking distance of M23, then this is going to kind of prove a theory that I've had. Apakulu Town, DRC. It's not easy to find places in Africa on the internet, apparently, because these places are not well provisioned. Let me go back to the okay. So this incursion by the ADF is a true massacre. CRDH coordinator Christopher Manyadura said, noting the true enemy has exploited the absence of security forces in the area. He called on the government to deploy troops to protect civilians. There's another story. Maybe I can look up that one as well. That might give me a better one. Additional, it says, last September, the armed group murdered at least 89 people in a string of overnight attacks in the North Kivu province. Congolese officials said militants raided a funeral in Ntoyo village, attacking people with machetes and killing at least 60. Additional killings were reported in Bini, with survivors describing scenes of brutality, including beheadings. A month earlier, the UN mission in Congo reported that 52 people were murdered in coordinated assaults across Bini and Lubero, which included abductions, looting, and arson attacks. In June 2023, the terrorist group crossed into Uganda, looted a secondary school, set fire to its dormitories, and killed at least 25 children. DR Congo authorities have said the militants are exploiting instability in North Kivu, where government forces have been battling the M23 rebel movement since clashes escalated in January 2025 in a decades-long conflict over the control of the resources. Ugandan soldiers and the Congolese counterparts have been conducting joint offensive operations against the ADF and other ISIS-affiliated rebels since November 2021 under Operation Shuja, targeting their strongholds in North Kivu and Ituri provinces. So Ituri province, it looks like I can at least identify where that is. So if here's Kivu, so that's Kivu, and then it looks like if Lake Albert's right here. Wait, that's not Lake Albert. Lake Albert is right. Lake Edward, Lake Kivu, Lake Albert. So it's up here. So it looks like ISIS is operating up here, actually. So North Kivu would be right here. So they're operating basically on the other side. And if ISIS is operating up here and M23 is operating down here, and the whole point is to destabilize eastern DR Congo, seize control of these mining towns, and make sure that they can. I'm just trying to make sense of this. I'm trying to make sense of why this would be happening. Why is ISIS operating with M23? My theory, I'll just lay it out there, is that M23 is being run by the people who lost control of the minerals. That would be Israel. That would be the Israeli diaspora, the Israeli elite, the people connected to Dan Gertler. If you believe that ISIS was also created by Israel, which I think it was, along with State Department, CIA, NATO, all that, then ISIS and M23 were basically created by the same people. And so them being deployed together in the DR Congo in order to reclaim control over $24 trillion worth of minerals, that all tracks. I think that's all a pretty reasonable thesis, hypothesis, I should say. It needs to be proven. But it's interesting that they're deploying up here, because I don't think that there are a lot of rare earth minerals up there, but I could be wrong. DR Congo mineral map. I'm sure I have some of these on my mind map, but let me just pull one up. Okay, so here's this looks like a good map right here. Okay, so this is a map that shows you all the rebel groups too. So we got the rebel groups with the minerals. So yeah, so here looks like these shaded areas right here are the mineral maps, right? But this ISIS group is allegedly operating way up here. And so this could be what Colonel Oak has told me is a demonstration where you basically send you dispatch a small force, you go somewhere far away. They did this in Ukraine with Russia. They went and they took Kursk, right? And then that forced Russia to redirect a lot of its troops to Kursk to fortify that, because it looked like Ukraine was going for the power plant up there. They were going to blow up a nuclear power plant and cause a huge humanitarian crisis. And then that took Russian forces away from the Eastern Front. And then that, of course, was reinforced by the heroes of the story, Kim Jong-un and the North Koreans. They came in and saved the day. That might be what's happening here. We might be getting ISIS operating in the north to pull forces away from Goma and North Kivu, South Kivu, so then M23 can expand and solidify its control. I don't know. All that is pretty interesting to me. May not be interesting to others, but this map right here is just showing you a zoomed in area of like the Kivu provinces where you see all these different groups are operating. And I would imagine that all these groups are probably connected to, and just to give you a sense of the size of the DR Congo, look at that overlaid of continental Europe. It's like the size of Europe, basically. Let me see if I can pull up a mineral wealth map, but if not, we're just gonna pull the trigger and get out of here. But I guess we'll table that for now. This is interesting. Nigerian military officers face trial over foiled coup plot. So it looks like back in October, they were arrested trying to overthrow the Nigerian government. Their coup was foiled. Says 16 officers were arrested in October following local media reports of a foiled coup. The military said the suspects were detained over acts of indiscipline and breaches of service regulations. In a statement on Monday, the Nigeria Defense Headquarters said that a comprehensive investigation had found that a number of the officers were involved in a conspiracy to destabilize the government. In addition, in violation of the Armed Forces of Nigeria's ethics, those with cases to answer will be formally arraigned before the appropriate military judicial panel to face trial. This ensures accountability while upholding the principles of fairness and due process. The measures are purely disciplinary and part of an ongoing institutional mechanisms to preserve order, discipline, and operational effectiveness within the ranks. And of course, this is interesting because of the whole fight between the Alliance of Sahel States and ECOWAS. So here's another story in Nigeria, but we covered this over a month and a half ago, almost 2 months ago. Nigeria helped foil a coup attempt in neighboring state. That would be Benin, right? It looked like Benin was going to be joining the Alliance of Sahel States. And if we go back to the map to kind of show what this all means, Nigeria is important because it's the most populated country in Africa. That's where most people in Africa live, or at least a large portion of them live. It's also like the seat of power for ECOWAS, which is like the UN detachment. So there's a lot of like globalist power structures in Nigeria, as I understand it. And that's partially what led, I think, or mostly what led to Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger breaking away from ECOWAS and rebelling with military juntas. And then Benin right here was that country that I just read about that that was trying to do the same thing. They were trying to rebel, like overthrow the UN in their country, reclaim their sovereignty. And then that coup was thwarted when the Nigerian military went in there and stopped it. So now this story is about a Nigerian coup that was foiled back in October. I don't know what to make of it. I don't know, it's hard to know what's what in especially in places like this. But what's interesting, the only reason I share this story at the last minute before we close things out is because as we were looking for videos earlier, I saw this come across my screen, and it's Turkey and Nigeria now signed a defense cooperation agreement. And so we've been told about there's like this operation against Christians inside of Nigeria, and the allegations from these bishops, from the stories that I've read on this show before, are that ISIS came into Nigeria, over the past few years, and that the government of Nigeria has allowed, and the police have allowed ISIS to come in and attack Christian communities, and they don't arrest people. The police don't show up and stop them. And the bishop said that the only people who are helping them are Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traore, who's a Muslim. But Ibrahim Traore has been very clear that his enemy are not a specific religion. His enemy are anyone who's seeking to destabilize the region and restore the colonial rule. And so that means going after these radical Islamic Muslim groups. That's the whole reason he took power in 2022, 2023, whenever it was. He was fighting ISIS in Burkina Faso. That's why Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger all experienced military coups, is because ISIS was taking over their country. And so officers in their military took over the government to fight back against ISIS with the backing of Russia, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, all of that. So this is really interesting. Turkey doing a defense agreement with Nigeria conflates all of this. It muddies up the signal. But again, this is how Erdogan operates. He kind of talks out of both sides of his mouth. He does things that make him appear an enigma. But you have to remember that Turkey is part of NATO. Nigeria is a key part of the UN power net, control network. This could be like a subversive move against the UN and against the unipolar hegemony. It is very, very interesting though, and something that we should just make a note of. We didn't even get into Saudi Arabia and the UAE and that whole fight. There's ostensibly a division happening between Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Maybe we'll talk about that on Friday. We also didn't talk about the coup that is happening, or failed coup that happened in China. The reason I didn't talk about that is because I suspect we will be talking about that tomorrow on Breaking History with Matt Arrett, because he is very well read in on China and knows a lot about this stuff. So I want to have the conversation with him. All right, let me read this rant from Friday that I missed from German Patriot 93, $5. Hey, Ghost, much respect for you. You do great work. However, I disagree on one point. As a European who has seen society change and had many experiences with Muslims, I do not believe Islam is peaceful. Well, thank you for the rant, German Patriot, and I respect your view and your take. And obviously, there are Islamic movements that are destabilizing and are meant to destroy Western civilization. However, I've run down the origins. I would encourage you say you live in, I assume you live in Germany. I would encourage you to figure out who are the groups that are operating on the ground in your area, and then get those names and run down where do they come from. Follow the money all the way back to wherever they came from. So if they came from Syria, or they came from Iraq, or they came from Africa, wherever they came from, figure out how did they get there to where you live. Who were the NGOs that brought them there? Where did the money come from? Was it Open Societies Foundation? Was it USAID? Was it National Endowment for Democracy? And if you want, send me the names of the groups that you're finding, and then I'll help you run this down. But what I've figured out and experienced, France as an example, the groups that are responsible for bringing the Muslims there are not other Muslims. It's actually Jesuit groups that are operating in coordination with Rothschild aligned banks. A lot of the leaders of these Jesuit groups are actually Rothschild bankers, right? Who grew up at Jesuit, but then at the age of 28, go to Cairo, get schooling in Cairo, learn to speak Arabic, and then they come back to France, as a Muslim, and they're like, "Oh, I'm actually Muslim now. I'm not a Jesuit anymore. I'm now Muslim." And then they advocate for the dismantling of churches. They advocate for bringing Muslims in from Africa and the Middle East. So it's a very subversive, ruse, like ploy. But again, what they want you to do is they want you to blame Islam so that you walk away saying, well, yeah, of course I support a war against Iran. Of course I support a war against the Middle East because I don't want these people coming to my country and dismantling my church and destroying my civilization. But that's why it's important to understand who are the groups that are actually bringing these Muslims to your neighborhood. Because Charlie Kirk, I could play countless clips of him saying that it is actually left-wing Jewish billionaires are the ones paying for those plane tickets and paying for that migration is Jewish billionaires. My research has found they're Jesuit. So I think it's both Jesuit and Jewish. And it could also be, the Vatican. It could also be other actors. So I would encourage you to run that down. But send me the names of any groups that you're finding in your area. I'd be happy to help you track that down. Let's go to rants. See if we have any others. Stop sharing this. Yeah, hit the thumbs up, guys. Share the show if you don't mind. Sleep State, $1 chat GBPH. I like that. Sleep State, another one, was Vance forced on Trump? And then there's a link that they send. And then there's a book from Luke Corbett, Heir to the Throne, J.D. Vance and the New American Right. That I'm not familiar with this book, but I am familiar, I think, with this line of thinking. And you may not be wrong. Chris Paul has spent a lot of time looking into that. And I would encourage you to go look into some of the stuff Chris Paul has put out there. But what I've found more often than not is that when things appear like they're forced on Trump, what ends up really being the case is that Trump kind of takes a step back and welcomes it. And he's like, okay, yeah, you want me to take on John Bolton as a member of my administration, Sheldon Adelson? Yeah, let's bring John Bolton in. Yeah, John Bolton, take a seat right there. And now you see John Bolton gets arrested recently for stealing classified intelligence. It's clearly he was sent into the Trump administration to push for war, but also probably to be a spy for the deep state. And now he's been arrested for basically doing that, in my assessment. So you might be right about that, but Trump is really good about taking that momentum and kind of doing jujitsu and then turning it around against the people who are using it against him. So we'll see, but thanks for the link. I will check that book out. Let's see what else we got. We have Brogent, $5. Can't stick around, Ghost. Will listen or replay, but have been wanting to say Carlos Leader only ever extradited in 1987. He was arrested briefly, only on warrant in 2025, but was released and freed. You're correct. My understanding, and I have to go back and double check my math here. My understanding, though, is that he was released by the U.S. government. Let me see. So I have an article right here. Let me just run this down. My understanding is that he was released by the U.S. government. I could be wrong about that. He was definitely released by the U.S. government in in 1987. He was arrested, sent to the U.S., and then they ended up releasing him. This is, again, the U.S. government releasing the guy who founded the Medellin cartel with Pablo Escobar. So here is that article real quick. I'll just go ahead and show this since this is part of a rant. Let's just look at this together. So infamous drug, this is from Latin America Reports. Infamous drug lord Carlos Leder was freed Monday after being arrested in Colombia on charges of arms and narcotics trafficking last Friday, March 28th. The Colombian Attorney General's office had guaranteed in the letter that the co-founder of the Medellin cartel would not face charges upon returning to the country after 38 years, but customs officers detained him under a judge's order. Monday morning, a Bogota court ruled that the charges had expired and the arrest was unlawful, granting Leader his freedom once again. The Colombian-German national, 75, is one of Colombia's most notorious drug kingpins, founding the Medellin cartel in the 1970s alongside Pablo Escobar. He was released from prison and deported to Germany in 2020 after serving 33 years in a cell after arriving in Colombia on a flight back from Frankfurt, where he had lived freely for almost 5 years. Migration officers detained him due to an outstanding warrant for historic crimes. Okay, so I think you are right that Colombia did release him. It says his lawyer, Sandra McCollins, denounced the arrest, citing their letter from the Attorney General's office and letters prison time in the U.S. Quote, "We hope that the sentencing judge can rule that the sentence has already been served and that they are not going to ignore his rights as they did in 1987. Letter was the first Colombian drug lord to be extradited to the United States. Many Colombians view extradition as a miscarriage of justice, according to Sergio Guzman, director at Colombia Risk Analysis, a security think tank. Extradition has been a pressure point for Colombian politics. This was difficult to swallow for a lot of people." Okay, so yes, I think you were right. So he was released in 2020 and then moved to Germany. And I think, let's see. So we'll go back, we'll circle back and look into that more, because that is something we should run down and better understand. But thanks for the rant. My understanding is the Medellin cartel is not really as much of a thing. It's kind of broken up into other cartels now. It's the Gulf Clan is really the big one, and then the Sinaloa cartel out of Mexico, and there's a number of other ones, but the Gulf Clan's the big one operating in Mexico these days. But I appreciate the rant, and that's a good correction. I appreciate being corrected, by the way, when I say things that are not factually true. Brogent, he's another rant. He's a German citizen and went to Germany after U.S. incarceration. Here's a great interview with him in 2025. I will definitely listen to that interview. So this is with Michael Franzis. So we will definitely listen to that. Appreciate that post. That's a good rant, Brogent. All right, Jin Hud, $5. Like you, I advocate DJT, but I'm concerned with Mini in his circle. I'm questioning everyone and can see how DJT could be a cabal player. I've concluded if there are 0 arrests in DJT time, then he is one of them. I mean, that's definitely a fair assessment. If 2028 comes and goes and nobody gets arrested and nothing ostensibly changes as far as like the deep state goes, and there's no quote unquote justice served, I would agree with you that is the optics of that are going to be tough to reconcile. I would also contend that if it's confusing to you what Donald Trump is, if Donald Trump looks like he's one thing, then it's also confusing to other people as well, right? And what I've learned is that hubris will blind people. If people are very full of themselves and they're very confident and they have hubris, they will basically see things the way they want to see them. And no matter how ridiculous it is. There's a movie that I just recommended for Burning Bright to watch for Story Hour. It's called The Rip. It's like a new movie that just came out. I think it's on Netflix. It's Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. Watch that movie. And when the movie's over, you'll understand why I'm recommending that movie. But go watch the whole movie and then think about what I say when it comes to Trumpomania and optics and kayfabe and all that. And yeah, that's that. I don't want to ruin the movie, so I'll just leave it at that. But that's all about like drug law enforcement and the cartels in South Florida. So that's an interesting movie to watch. And if Burning Bright does pick it for Story Hour, it'll be because I brought it to his attention. All right, guys, let me just check the Badlands brief. I mean, I'm sorry, the Badlands boost. It's amazing how we're almost at 2.5 hours, and I feel like we didn't get to talk about like half the stuff I wanted to talk about, because I like going deep on these like single topics. All right, I think we're caught up. Facts Not Wishes. Make sure I've read this before, but $51. This is for Ghost for Badlands Blitz. By the way, the verify that you are human pop-up in the Badlands website offers no actual way to do that. Didn't used to do it, but it's routinely keeping me from leaving Boost now. Okay, I did send that to, I think it was Brad, to let him know. So hopefully that's been addressed. But thank you. I think I remember reading that before. All right, guys, I appreciate it. Let's hit the thumbs up, share the show, and we will get everybody out of here now and raid over to any show that is running right now. I don't know if, I think Maha is going now. I think they started a Tuesday show. So we will raid Maha. Y'all have a great day. This is Geopolitics the Ghost.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.